How we doing? How we doing? This is Destination Denver, Colorado, and today we're talking about 3 cities that are consistently brought up to me by people moving to the Denver metro area. We're talking Denver versus Colorado Springs versus Fort Collins. What's the best city for you? Let's talk about it, starting right now. All right, this is Destination Denver, Colorado. I'm your host, Jimmy Evertson. Listen, if you're interested in learning all the ins and outs, pros and cons to moving to the Denver metro area, then this is the channel for you. So that subscribe button and notification icon you see on your screen, make sure you click on that as I'm dropping new videos for you each and every week. And as much as I try to be a little informative here on camera, I'm also a licensed mortgage broker covering the entire state of Colorado and team with some of the state's most talented realtors. And we're helping people move here each and every day. So that number and email you see on your screen, know that I am always the person answering your phone calls, answering your texts, answering emails. They're winning if you need me. Now that we're done with that fun-filled stuff, let's get to what we're here for, and that is Denver versus Colorado Springs versus Fort Collins. Which is the best city for you? All right, so let's start with some super basics. If we're comparing each 3, we're talking location. All 3 are going to line up along I-25 because our major north-south highway runs certainly through the heart of 3 of our bigger cities and communities in Colorado. So Denver is obviously going to be your biggest with a population of over 700,000. And when you start talking about the Denver metro area, now you're talking multiple millions, close to 3 million at this point. Colorado Springs is Colorado's second largest city, sitting at about 470,000. And then you have Fort Collins, which sits at about 170 plus, but it seems a little bigger than that population would describe. So growing up in Colorado, Denver, remains. It is the epicenter of Colorado as far as cities go and as far as the economy. Colorado Springs has always kind of been the stepbrother down to the south, but gaining size, gaining popularity. And listen, we love us some Colorado Springs, and then Fort Collins becoming this like growing popular hotbed where people are really starting to look. So do we move up north? Do we land in the middle of Denver, or do we head south to Colorado Springs? Now, from an economic standpoint, obviously Denver is going to be your mecca as far as Colorado goes. And it's not just Denver. You're going to have communities like Broomfield and Boulder, Littleton, a lot of different communities that add to that economic flux. So when we're talking about job markets, a lot of people are going to make that determination of where they're going to live based on the opportunities Denver provides. However, in saying that, Colorado Springs has certainly started to heat up. For a long time, it was a military town, a lot of defense contractors down there, but there are a lot of businesses going down to Colorado Springs, and they like the fact that they're going to have some outgoing military members. Companies love hiring the military, or at least they should if they don't, but so you have that hotbed. Fort Collins now, long known for a college town, we'll get into that, but the economy in Fort Collins has been on fire lately, especially in the tech and finance sectors. So you see a lot of growing traction in Fort Collins because of that. So there might have been a time where when I would talk to people about moving to Colorado, I would say, you're probably going to want to stick to Denver. That's where the jobs are. But now Fort Collins and Colorado Springs both competing in that environment. So people don't have to necessarily determine, I'm going to Denver for the job. Now, cost of living is interesting, and I'm going to include some data here. So Denver is going to have overall higher cost of living than either Colorado Springs or Fort Collins. That's part of the reason that people start looking into either of those 2 other communities to begin with. But what I found really interesting while preparing to make this video and talking to people in these communities was the fact that I expected Colorado Springs to be slightly more expensive than Fort Collins, and to see the opposite was actually true. Now, I knew from a housing standpoint, housing in Fort Collins tends to be more expensive than Colorado Springs, but just your day-to-day living tends to be slightly ahead. Denver, as you'll see when you compare Denver to Colorado Springs, when you compare Denver to Fort Collins, Denver is going to be more expensive. People tend to make a little more money in Denver as well, but again, that is slightly off. The median income in Denver compared to the other 2 is roughly $6,000 to $7,000 higher. The median income between Colorado Springs and Fort Collins is only about $1,000 off of each other. So again, those 2 towns, again, whether you're in North Colorado or in Southern Colorado, are pretty comparable. In Denver, again, being more expensive in that regard. Now, from an education standpoint, if we're talking, elementary, middle school, high school, there's a ton of options, and tough to really talk about how, these big cities from an education standpoint overall will appear. Certainly you'll have some good options and want to do your due diligence there. As far as higher education, in Denver, you've got multiple universities. You've got CU Denver, you've got Metro, you've got DU, an amazing college. There's a lot of opportunities and selections in Denver. You get down to Colorado Springs, certainly the Air Force Academy is going to be the big dog there. Colorado College, also located in Colorado Springs. And then Fort Collins, Colorado State University. So I'll get all my CU Buff fans. I'm not a graduate of either of those universities, but the big rivalry there. But Colorado State plays a huge part of what Fort Collins is. We'll get to that as we go through this video. So when we talk about educational opportunities, you're going to have universities in all three. Denver will have certainly more choices, but it doesn't get much bigger than, for instance, Colorado State. Now, when we're talking about these three cities, I want to dive into just kind of the living effect of them, because certainly living in Denver, if you're really close to the city, is going to have a different feel to it than if you're living in Fort Collins or if you're living in Colorado Springs. Denver is a modestly large size city. Again, as I say in every video, I'm not comparing Denver to a New York, a Chicago, a Los Angeles, anything like that. But when we talk about your mid-level cities, Denver's big and continuing to grow. Now, you still have, the access to outdoor living we'll get into, but when you talk about city and culture, there's more to do in Denver. Just when we talk about city living, that's just the nature of it. You're going to have more music options, concerts, things of that nature. You're going to have more restaurants. You're going to have sporting events. You're going to have, Fort Collins and Colorado Springs are going to have museums. They're going to have art galleries. They're going to have history. There's a lot, again, of culture in each community. So it really comes down to, do you want I can't call Denver the Mecca. Do you want the bigger city energy? Do you want Colorado Springs that from a culture or from a city standpoint is kind of mid-level? It's not a big city, but it's a city. Or do you want Fort Collins that tends to have more of almost a small town feel to it? It has a great downtown area, great culture, but kind of that smaller town, slower pace to it. Now, the one thing, if you are really about getting into the mountains and getting, especially if you're going to go up I-70 up to, a Breckenridge, a Vail, and Aspen, you're really getting into the Rockies, Fort Collins is actually going to have kind of the longest route. You got to head a bit south and then cut across into the mountains. But overall, Fort Collins is right there in the mountains. You've got some great outdoor amenities, including Horsetooth Reservoir. So when I'm talking about really enjoying the outdoors, even though Denver may have quicker access to parts of the Rockies, I don't think I could look someone in the eye and say, oh, no. If you live in Denver, you're going to have a better outdoor experience than if you live in Fort Collins. That is a beautiful town, really is. Much more green than you'll see in Denver and in Colorado Springs. And you're certainly not going to have a better experience outdoors-wise in Denver necessarily than you would in Colorado Springs. That again has quick access to the Rockies, is home to Garden of the Gods, just some great hikes and outdoor amenities. So all three of these communities, part of the nature of living in Colorado is the benefit of all this outdoor beauty. Now jumping into climate a little bit, and I'll be pretty brief here. We always talk about our sunshine. You're going to get that throughout. Colorado Springs does tend to be overall have a higher overall climate. All three are going to get a little bit of snow. Colorado Springs tends to get a little less, although I have been told that their precipitation is slightly higher in Colorado Springs. Fort Collins, again, we're not talking about a massive distance. Colorado Springs, here it comes. This is one of my favorite. I'm going to get people commenting. The drive time between Colorado Springs and Denver, if there is zero traffic and you are doing 75 miles an hour the entire time, it's about an hour. If there is traffic, it could be anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours, but it's a 70-mile distance from Denver to Colorado Springs. You're not going to see a huge climate change. Same thing when you're going from Denver to Fort Collins. You will see a bit more snow in Fort Collins, can be a bit more cold in the winter. But again, if we're talking about just overall climate, you're not going to see a massive, drastic difference. You will see there's more moisture overall in Fort Collins. You see that in how green Fort Collins can be, whereas Denver, and especially as you get into Colorado Springs, can be a bit more of that greenish yellow color to it. Now, what might be important to some people may not be to others, and when we talk about nightlife, certainly Denver is going to have more of that, as I mentioned earlier. It's going to have more clubs, more restaurants, more bars, more amenities as far as a city and living. Is there plenty to do in Colorado Springs and in Fort Collins? I suppose that depends on your lifestyle. If you are a city person and you like to be able to do new things all of the time, you might run out of options pretty quick in Colorado Springs or in Fort Collins. Granted, there's neighboring communities you can go and experience. So I think when we're talking about these cities, if all things are equal, if you can afford all three, the climate of all three doesn't matter, but you're more of a city person, you want to enjoy all the concerts, all the shows, you like sporting events, you're probably going to lean to Denver. If those things, or having a wide selection of those things, don't matter to you, then either Fort Collins or Colorado Springs are going to fit the bill. One thing that I get as constant feedback from people who move to Denver specifically by themselves is that there's a bit of social isolation, that it can be a bit challenging, especially if you're not working in an environment where you're around new people and maybe making friends at work. It can be challenging to get to know people, start making acquaintances and building that. Some have more success than others, certainly. Now, I have been told by enough people that I've worked with, experienced, and are friends with, moving to Colorado Springs a bit more welcoming, at least in their perspectives. Now, Colorado Springs is probably used to a more influx. You have a lot of military. I work with a lot of military who are moving into the communities of Colorado Springs. And Colorado Springs is very, not just military oriented, but they're used to new people coming in, and tends to have kind of a smaller town vibe to it that you can connect with people on. Similar feelings in Fort Collins. I do hear a bit of duality there. I hear to some extent some people move to Fort Collins and they say, no, if you're not from Fort Collins or you're not part of these communities, you tend to get cold-shouldered. But then I've also had enough people tell me that they've really enjoyed the experience, that the communities are very welcoming. I think overall, when we're talking about people being friendly, it's all about finding your tribe. Sometimes it's harder to do, or it takes a little longer than in other communities. But overall, I think Fort Collins and Colorado Springs get very, very good responses from people moving there. Denver is the one community where it can be hit or miss. As much as it is a melting pot and hotbed for people moving here, there is a level of being overwhelmed by the communities and not connecting, feeling that social isolation. So something to consider when you're comparing Denver to the other two. So I think one thing we also have to keep in mind is accessibility. If you are somebody who needs to travel a lot, if you need to get to a major airport and get in and out of Colorado, Denver International Airport is the thing. Obviously, Denver closest to it. Colorado Springs does have its own airport. It has some, connected flights. You can get out of Colorado there, or you might, in some instances, take a flight from Colorado Springs up to Denver and out. But if you're, again, someone who needs to fly quite often, Denver's probably going to lead the way for you. So, Fort Collins, you're not going to have many options there. Odds are, again, you're going to be coming to DIA, to Denver International Airport. Colorado Springs, you're going to have that drive. So if you're a big traveler, odds are you're going to be looking at Denver as a focal point for where you want to move. So, and then I certainly want to touch on crime rates, because I think as people talk about moving to Denver, a community that several sectors of Denver have seen an increase in crime over years, hopefully starting to level off and decrease. But certainly people have asked me, hey, how would you compare crime and overall safety in Denver than to a Colorado Springs, than to a Fort Collins? As I will tell you, I'll say the same thing with schools. You're always going to want to do your due diligence. You're always going to want to do your own research there to make sure that the communities you are moving to are safe, and all of that, crime reports, everything is public record. The feedback I get on Fort Collins is that it's a very comfortable, safe community. Does that mean every single street of Fort Collins is perfectly fine? You should be out at all hours of the night? No. But I know I would say the same thing for Denver, and I would say the same thing for Colorado Springs. Awareness of where you are is everything. I live in Denver. I feel safe in 99% of this city, and I've learned the areas that I'm generally going to avoid. And I love my banter here, so here come the comments. But I'll tell you this. I have not experienced, and I've lived all over the world for that matter, but certainly all over the United States. I can't think of a single town I've ever lived in where there weren't locations that were less desirable than others. As small a town was, you knew a couple blocks over wasn't the good part of town, over here was. So as you're exploring these communities, know that there are going to be amazing parts of Fort Collins, amazing parts of Denver, in the metro area, amazing parts of Colorado Springs, and then there are going to be areas that as you get to know them, you're going to realize, we don't really go to that part of town. And that is going to apply no matter where you live at any time in your life. And the last thing I want to talk about just very briefly is some of the cooler amenities or things that are in that location. Do I think it's going to be the reason you move somewhere? No, but just so you have that. So for Denver, it's going to be Red Rocks. It's going to be the amenities downtown like the zoo, the museum, the botanical gardens, and it's going to be, I already said Red Rocks, but it's going to be the different music venues throughout town. And then, as I mentioned, your sporting events. So you've got the Denver Broncos pro football, you've got the Denver Nuggets and Colorado Avalanche pro basketball and pro hockey, you've got the Colorado Rockies, the best minor league baseball team ever allowed to play in the major leagues, you've got soccer, you've got lacrosse. If you're a sport guy, Denver's going to be the way. If you're talking about Colorado Springs, you're going to go to Pikes Peak. You're going to go to Garden of the Gods. You're going to go to the Olympic Training Center because there's a lot of action going on there. And just outside of Colorado Springs, you're going to go to Manitou. So you can do the incline where a bunch of people go to walk up or run up or sprint up a bunch of stairs that are going to exhaust you, but it's a big thing to do there. And then if you get to Fort Collins, obviously, you're going to go to their historic downtown because downtown Fort Collins is outstanding. You're going to go to Horsetooth Reservoir, as I mentioned earlier, a very cool place to take boats out, go swimming. They've got some great houses along it. I love Horsetooth overall. And then Fort Collins is big for breweries. So prepare yourself. You're going to go drink a lot of beer. And if you don't drink beer, you can still go into the breweries and just smell the beer. So overall, I think one of the biggest evolutions that we have seen in Colorado is the development, not just of Denver growing, but more and more people looking at Colorado Springs, looking at Fort Collins, seeing these communities, and seeing how they are becoming more and more interconnected. It used to be you left Denver, you had a long blank drive until you got to Fort Collins. Same thing, you left Denver, you had a long blank canvas drive down to Colorado Springs. A lot of that area is being filled in. So as you're looking at Denver, if you have the flexibility, maybe you don't have to be in the heart of Denver, certainly I would encourage you to compare Colorado Springs, compare Fort Collins. And if there are other communities that interest you, that's a perfect opportunity to give me a call. The number and email showing up on your screen know that I am always the person. Answer your phone calls, answer your texts, answer your emails. There, when and if you need me. That was Destination Denver, Colorado. I am your host, Jimmy Everett. That was Denver versus Colorado Springs versus Fort Collins. Which city is best for you? Until I see you next time, peace.